Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 23rd of September. Today we have some updates, so let's start. And first I would like to start with Donetsk, the capital of DPR Republic. As you know, the referendums in this region have started. 4 referendums in Kherson district, Zaporozhye region, DPR Republic and LPR Republic. Now let's take a look at Donetsk. As you can see, there is no icons of fire above Donetsk. Today was the first day, I believe, since the 2014 when Donetsk wasn't under heavy shelling. And to tell the truth, I'm not trying to be pro-Russian or to be pro-Ukrainian, but anyway, I would like to say thanks to Zelensky because of that his army didn't attack this town, didn't shell this town during the day, during the referendum, because we understand that there were a lot of civilians all around the town who were trying to vote, and of course any attack could bring a lot of casualties among civilians. And we understand that this day was very important for both sides, for the Ukrainians and for the DPR Republic. And according to some logic, we could understand if Zelensky would order to bomb this town during this day, because it's like the day when a part of Ukraine completely left the Ukraine, and now we can say, and I believe that this territory is going to become a part of Russian Federation. And during that day, we haven't seen any heavy bombing or shelling or casualties among civilians that happened as a result of Ukrainian attack. And this is very good update. This is very good news, because I see that this is not just like an absence of shelling of this town. This is the first light signs of the fact that maybe the negotiation can be between parties, and maybe the Russians and the Ukrainians are able to complete this war without reducing Ukraine till ruins. That was a very nice sign. I believe that you know that a few days ago there was a prisoners war exchange, and the Russians returned around a little bit more than 50 soldiers, and the Ukrainians returned more than 250 soldiers. Maybe that was some kind of part of that deal, that the Russians promised to return as much as possible Ukrainians, but they required for that not to bomb and shell these towns during the referendum. Maybe that was some kind of this, because it's hard to believe that, sometimes it's hard to believe that it's even possible. But even if it's so, even if it is like that Ukrainians requested for more than 250 Azov soldiers, and for that they promised not to bomb. Even this situation is nice, a very nice sign that this war can stop, and I believe that sooner or later this war is going to stop. Now let's talk about the front lines. We're talking about Kherson district. There were a few attempts of the Ukrainians to understand what's going on the front lines, and the Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours they attacked this 59th brigade that located between Nikolaev and Kherson. As a result of that rocket attack, the Ukrainians, this 59th and 63rd brigade, lost around 130 soldiers. If we're talking about the calculation of the losses, since July, according to my calculation, the Ukrainians lost more than 55,000 soldiers, including killed and wounded and lost and captured and so on. Furthermore, if we're talking about the south of Ukraine, about this area, we got a lot of updates from Odessa. We haven't heard any updates, any information from Odessa, I believe, like since the July or the end of July. But today, right before I start recording this video, we got a lot of video confirmation of this, that the Russians start using their drones, Gerань. It's like some kind of a controlled rocket that can fly above the town, and the Russians can aim this drone and so on. So the Russians attacked this area, and the Ukrainians couldn't do anything with that. I believe that these Iranian drones can change this game, and the Russian mobilization will change this game as well. And we need to understand what Ukrainians can do with that. So let's see. If we are talking about Zaporozhye area, there were no changes, no updates. There was some kind of small explosion in the town, but as far as I understand, nobody was killed. Just some kind of a small terror action without any consequences. Furthermore, if we're talking about the borderline, today we got update that Ukrainians got some clothes of Russian soldiers. They changed their clothes and they managed to break through the defense line, and they managed to move even further than Palogin. I believe they were trying to understand. It was some kind of recon in combat maybe, or I don't know what was that, but anyway, they managed to penetrate this area, small group, to understand what's going on, and I believe that during this day the Russians were trying to spot and to got these commandos, but there were no more updates during the day. If we are talking about Donetsk, as you can see, there were no changes, no shelling, there were no battles along the front line, so the situation was stable, and this is very good news, I believe, for today. If we are moving further about Zaporozhye, another important update that near this town, near Zaporozhye, there was like attack. The Russians, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were trying to, and they got some national battalions in this area. The Russians are saying that they got national battalions by the name of Dnieper, Skiv, Gepard, and the result of those attacks, these national battalions in the Zaporozhye area lost around 190 soldiers. So that's a lot, of course, for one day. Now we are moving to area between Donetsk and Seversk. There is no changes on the front line. Let's say on the Bakhmut front line, the Russians are still storming or clearing this area. Who knows? Because there were no updates. Maybe they did nothing because everybody from the Russian side, I believe, were expecting for the Ukrainians' counteroffensive operation, but we haven't seen anything for today from the Ukrainian side, so the situation is stable. Now we are moving to one of the most important area in this week is Lyman bridgehead, Oskol Lyman bridgehead. Yesterday we discussed about the Ukrainians' counteroffensive operation in direction of Redka-Dub. The Ukrainians were stopped. They moved back to the town by the name of Alexandrovka, Krymtsy, Yatskovka. There are some commandos near Karov Yar, some force in Lazova, but today the Ukrainians couldn't develop their offensive operation. They couldn't develop their bridgehead, so the situation, I'm not sure about the clashes on this front line. The Russian resources haven't reported anything about this situation. Maybe that this silence is also connected with the referendums on DPR, LPR, but anyway, yesterday the Ukrainians managed to achieve some success, and they should have repeat their success today, but they didn't do anything on this front line. Furthermore, the Ukrainians still tried to storm Lyman, this area, but the Russians today gave us some numbers about the Ukrainian losses during this storm operation, and the Russians are saying that during the previous hour, the previous day, they attacked a lot this area using the rockets and artillery. And for example, if we're talking about Kramatorsk, this one, there are 81st, as far as I remember, Air Mobile Brigade. Let's take a look at this map. Yes, Air Mobile Brigade in Kramatorsk were attacked by the Russians, and as a result of that attack, this brigade lost around 220 soldiers. And this brigade was and is the most important brigade in this counter-offensive operation direction of Lyman, and as you can see, they had a lot of losses during the previous hours. Furthermore, if we're talking about Ozerne, it's the town on the Russian side of Seversky Donetsk River, and the Russians reported that they attacked this area heavily, and mainly there were foreign legion battalion, foreign volunteers located in this area, and as a result of Russian attack in this area, these foreign legion forces and foreigners, their losses was around 100 soldiers. So as you can see, the Ukrainians still try to do something right in front of Lyman, but all the attempts were defeated from the Russian side. If we're talking about this bridgehead, I'll repeat myself, the Ukrainians managed to achieve some success yesterday, but for today there is no progress. And as you remember, yesterday I told you that if we take a look at the map of this position, this area is under protection of the tank armies, and I mean it's very armored. This position is very completely armored with tanks, with armored vehicles, so that's why the Russians gave the Ukrainians possibilities to come out from this forest on the open field, and from the very big distance the Russians are reducing the Ukrainians as much as possible. For example, if we try to calculate the distance between let's say the Russian position and the Ukrainians and the forest, it's around 10 kilometers of open field, and it's not a very big problem for the Russian to spot anything on these fields. So that's why the Ukrainians left their forest now, and now they can't do anything. There is some chances to try to attack Shindrigalovo, this river, but the same situation. These positions, it's totally fortified by the Russians. There are volunteers, Russian army in these towns, and as you can see, the Ukrainians spent around 1 week of storming this area, and they haven't achieved any success in that. And that furthermore, the Russian sources are saying that during this week of Ukrainian attempts of storming this town, the Ukrainians have already lost more forces than they have lost during the counter-offensive operation in Kharkiv area. And I'll remind you that during the Kharkiv offensive operation, the Ukrainians lost a little bit more than 2,000 soldiers killed and something around 6,000-7,000 wounded. But as a result of those counter-offensive operations, the Ukrainians managed to return control over Balaklia, Shevchenko, the west part of Kupiansk, Izum bridgehead, and the north part of Kharkiv area, a lot of territory. But as a result of this counter-offensive operation on Lyman bridgehead, the Ukrainians have already lost more forces than 3,000 soldiers. I believe that soon we are going to receive more numbers about this attempt of counter-offensive operation, and as a result, the Ukrainians didn't got anything, just the towns in this forest along the Seversky Donetsk river. But as soon as winter comes and the level of the water rise and the temperature of the water go down, the Russians will be able to push the Ukrainians back on that side. Furthermore, they will be able to destroy every single Ukrainian unit between Seversky Donetsk river and their territory. If you remember yesterday, I told you that if Ukrainians want to achieve some success in Lyman bridgehead, they need to do something near Dvorichi and Kupiansk, to do something to break through this area and so on. And today the Russians gave us first few updates from this area. Let's take a look at the Russian sources map. The first thing that the Russians attacked the 14th Mechanized Brigade headquarters in this area. And we got this report this morning, but later, somewhere like half an hour before I start record this video of local time, there was an update that Ukrainians were trying to penetrate, to crack this area, and with a very big powerful fist the number of infantry they were using in that operation during today was around 2,000 soldiers. So that's a lot, believe me, 2,000 soldiers, that's a lot on one small front line. But the Russians are saying that they managed to spot this group, they managed to discover this group, and after that they start massive artillery shelling of this area. This group was completely defeated, and I believe that soon we are going to receive numbers of Ukrainian losses on this bridgehead. So as you can see, without this operation, the entire South counter-offensive operation is nothing, is zero. Because if the Ukrainians want to have some success, they need to penetrate the area between Dvorichi and Kupiansk, but they still haven't done this, and I believe that they won't be able to do this ever. Because furthermore, if we take a look at the Russian source map, the Ukrainians are shelling this area heavily. This is the main road where the Russians are moving their reinforcements and support to the front line between Kupiansk and Dvorichi. So that's why the Ukrainians are trying to reduce this support as much as possible, but as you can see, for now they don't have any result. Furthermore, during these previous videos I received a lot of comments, and the people were asking me what I would do if I were the Ukrainians to do something, at least anything, on this front line. And what would I do in this situation is, if I was Ukrainian, of course. If we're talking about the front line between Dvoretsky and Kupitsk, I would continue doing some counter-offensive operation in this area, but was with one purpose: to pin down the Russians and to stretch their artillery and rockets attacks. Just to force the Russians to pay attention to this area and always to be stressed. Of course, there would be a lot of losses, but if we're talking about the result, the Ukrainians don't have any other position. Furthermore, their situation near this bridgehead is that it is very difficult for the Ukrainians now to move their forces from this area. As you can see, there is just one railroad, and this area is without railroads, so it's not a very easy job to move forces from this area towards other front lines. So the Ukrainians have their forces there, and their main job that they need to do is to send commanders and scouts on that side of the river, trying to reduce the Russian force as much as possible. If we are talking about Lyman area, I would do the same thing as the Ukrainians do right now, trying to press the Russians, but trying to save people and not to push them on to death, trying to save the soldiers as much as possible. Furthermore, I would try to accumulate as much as possible armored vehicles on this side of the river in the forest, and as soon as time comes, I will try to do a very broad frontline attack all along the front lines, starting from Oskol River towards Lyman, with one broad line attack, trying to move as far as possible, trying to take more towns. But this is not; these two directions is not the most important and main directions according to my plan. The main direction of Ukrainian attack on this front line, the first one, Dvoretsky Kupinsk, the second one is Oskol Lyman area. But the main area where the Ukrainians need to make attack is area from Serebryanka, from this front line. So this is the area where the Ukrainians need to accumulate as much force as possible, and from this area they need to attack in the direction of Dibrova. Using this forest, our famous forest, if you remember, many months ago I was suggesting to use this forest for the Ukrainians to retreat from Lysychansk agglomeration. Now my proposal and projection, if the Ukrainians want to achieve success, they need to use the same forest to attack in direction of Dibrova. Why do I think that this operation is possible? Let's take a look at the Russian sources map. You're going to see that there are a lot of areas, a lot of roads. As you can see, these electricity line engineering constructions, and the Ukrainians do have possibility to use these lines as roads to move their armored vehicles and even more tanks to the north, trying to take Dibrova. Furthermore, if you remember, the Russians from their side were trying to cross Seversky-Donetsk River using this road. So the question, why the Ukrainians can't do the same? So they can. And if you remember a few videos ago, I told you that the Russians attack Serebryanka, Severs, the 1st Tank Brigade, the 17th Tank Brigade. So I believe that Ukrainians also understand that this is the only area where the Ukrainians can hit, because there is a very big forest, and right after forest they can enter into Dibrova, and they need to establish their bridgehead in this area. With help of this, they will be able to cut Kremenaya and Lyman in the middle, and they will be on the very safe side, because they will be able to hide their armored vehicles, their tanks, their infantry in this forest, and just to make rotation in Dibrova, trying to be on the safe side. So let's mark this area. So the Ukrainians, if they want to penetrate this area and to take control, first they need to establish control bridgehead, a very stable bridgehead in this area, right in front of 3 forests. And as discussed in the previous videos, according to the experience we have, the Ukrainians are pretty successful in forest, and furthermore they will be able to have a stable connection from Seversk, from Serebryanka, using this forest, and they will be able to move their forces in direction of Dibrova easily. Of course, this area is mined, and the Ukrainians will have to spend some time to demine this area. Also, there will going to be some losses from their side, but anyway, this is the only option what the Ukrainians can do in this situation. And furthermore, if we are talking about the next steps, the taking control over Dibrova is not a strategic success. It's just a tactical success. So to tell the truth, there are a lot of questions what to do next if the Ukrainians will be able to take Dibrovo, because yes, from this area they will be able to attack, and they will be able to use a lot of direction of their attack in direction of Kremenaya, in direction of Zarechna. Furthermore, they will be able to send their commandos, mobile forces to the north. And believe me that if we are talking about direction of Ukrainian attack, Zarechna is important, Kremenaya is important, but the most important direction is from this bridgehead to the north. They will be able to send a lot of commandos, a lot of scouts, and this will force the Russians to stretch their front line and to spend their manpower on this front line, trying to have a lot of checkpoints in this area just with one purpose, to fight with these commanders. And this might have a very nice effect for the Ukrainians on other front lines, because for this purpose the Russians will be forced to move some forces from this area to this area, and of course this can bring the situation when some front lines in this area will be a little bit less effective than they was before the Russians will move force from this area. And after that, the Ukrainians will be able to increase their pressure on Lyman bridgehead, on Korovy Yar bridgehead, and near Dvorechye bridgehead, and maybe after that they will be able to achieve some success and will be able to push the Russians from this front line. So this is my understanding of the situation, that the most important area that Ukrainians need to establish control over is Dibrovo and Kuzmin. This like the area between Kremenaya and Zarechna and Lyman. So because this is the only supply road, and if we're talking about this supply road, this road is not very effective, is not very good, because if we're talking Kremenaya, there is at least a railroad, and the Russians are able to move their reinforcement even from Kupiansk, from Svatova, this is the capital of this area, of this region, to the direction of Kremenaya, and from Kremenaya the Russians are able to move their reinforcements in direction of Lyman. So, but if Ukrainians are able to cut the supply road, then they will be able to reduce the power of Lyman group of Russians. So I believe that, but I believe that the Russians also are not stupid. I understand that they also see this situation. So let's see. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds us we condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.